Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Center for Law and Global Policy, Lexington County School District 1 School Board Candidate Debate. My name is Troy Fight, and we are coming to you live from Lexington, South Carolina, from River Bluff High School. I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight is the second of 3 sessions. I would like to thank our sponsors, the River Bluff Center of Law and Global Policy Development and the River Bluff Center for Media Arts. At this time, I would like to introduce our candidates. Moving from my left across the stage, Ms. Anne Marie Green, Mr. Mike Griffin, and Mr. Jason Hinton. I would also like to introduce our question panel, Dakota Price, Matthew Smith, Samantha Timmerman, and later we'll be joined by Carlos Lopez. We also have a timekeeper tonight, Mr. Hampton Cope. At this time, candidates, I'd like to go over a couple of rules with you. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond to each question. Each candidate can take 45 seconds, for rebuttal and follow-up or in response or an open discussion comment. Our timekeeper, Mr. Cope, will remind the candidates of their time by showing them a green card when they have 30 seconds left to answer, a yellow card when there are 15 seconds left, and a red card when their time is up. So please finish your statements timely before you see the red card. Our rules for tonight, everyone's following, are our COVID-19 masks are mandatory for everyone. Once this event is over, we ask that you exit the premises immediately. Secondly, for violations tonight, this forum will not tolerate inappropriate language or name calling or etc. Candidates must stay on topic, and there's an expectation of respect. Candidates will be asked to refrain from interrupting, and we will ask the audience to refrain from clapping while the candidates are speaking, either before or after they speak. Audience members will be asked to leave if they choose to ignore these requests. Finally, your first offense, you'll receive a warning. Your second offense, a candidate will lose the opportunity to answer further questions. If you need my attention, a simple hold up of your hand will be enough. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our question panel. I'd like to turn it over to Dakota to ask our first question. Our first topic tonight will be that of the COVID-19.
With a recent rise in the talks of a vaccine for the coronavirus, if you were elected, would you make it mandatory for both students and faculty to receive the vaccine like you have done in the past with other diseases?
We're going to start tonight with Ms. Green. We'll move across the stage. As we move through each question, I will go in a different order. Ms. Green?
That's a great question, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to have a vaccine in the very near future. I do understand that the guidelines that the government has released, that there are going to be priority groups that get the vaccine, and so it may be some time before young adults, teenagers, children are eligible for the vaccine. I certainly think that we should make it a recommendation. As you know, the vaccines that we require for our schools now are mandatory, but with some exceptions. And I think that those are important for families, and individual situations for children and as well as staff. But I do think that it would be very important that we trust the vaccine, and then once we know that it has been tested and that it's a valid vaccine, that we should encourage our staff and our students to get that vaccine in order to attend our schools.
Yes, Mr. Griffin?
Dakota, that was a good question. To answer your question for me, I don't see how the board could make a mandatory ruling with regard to the vaccine. They could make a very strong recommendation, and I think that is exactly what I would do. I would make that recommendation, but out there are parents and there are families who have issues about trusting that vaccine. It's going to be so new at that time. I'd like to see the scientific proof before answering to say, yes, I would absolutely mandate that for our students. I hope it's there. I would like for it to come quickly so these masks can go away rapidly.
Yes, Mr. Hinton.
Yeah, I would somewhat echo what Mike just said. I mean, the vaccines we have out there right now that are mandatory, they've been proven over 8, 12, 20 years in some cases. Once the data's there, once the health has been proven that there's no ill effects of it, I wouldn't have an issue with vaccines becoming mandatory if that's what the directives are.
I'd like to redirect a question to you, Ms. Green. You mentioned in your statement that there are mandatory vaccines required currently with certain exceptions. Do you know the process of how those mandatory vaccines came into play?
I really am not an expert on the history of the vaccines in our schools. I know that my children were vaccinated prior to attending school. I know that there is the expectation that students for their 7th grade receive a certain vaccine. There are certain age-appropriate vaccines that pediatricians recommend. I don't really know what the history is of the implementation of that, so no,
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
And
question.
I apologize because you're the only one that's currently seated on the board, so I asked that question to you. All right. Matthew, do you have our next question, please?
All right, yes, sir. So dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, each of you may have a different approach with dealing with the virus for our students and our teachers and our Lex One families. So would you be interested in returning to 4 days a week for our schools, families, teachers, or would you like to wait until it is, in quote, safe and under control as far as like the virus is concerned?
Mr. Griffin, I'll let you take this question first.
Thank you. First of all, I will very quickly tell you, yes, I would be interested in returning to 4 days a week if it's safe. And I think that's the key right there. You're going to have to make it very, very palatable to the families of Lexington to ensure that they send their children into a situation that is with very little doubt that they're going to return home safely in that afternoon. So I would like to see that, and I miss my students, just to be very honest with you. So yes, I would support that.
Ms. Hinton?
So right now, I have to speak this from a personal perspective. I'm one of the Lula parents. I'm teaching my kids at home right now. We're strictly home, not going to school at all. From my perspective, seeing what's going on out there, I would be okay sending my students back. But I do have to admit that I've been somewhat impressed with some of the way that the virtual schooling has been handled. I feel like there's probably some new opportunities there to maybe that's something that could be continued on in the future. The flexibility is nice. I worry about the truancy applications of it. I do feel like there's some issues where some students are getting lost, that's becoming a big deal. I worry about my own kids. I don't feel like some of the social interactions are where they need to be. But when it comes down to it, I'm very much a proponent for the schools starting back up. But I would like to keep thinking about the flexibility that the LUDA program is offering.
Okay, Ms. Green?
Absolutely. I think that we all want everybody to be back in school 5 days a week, like we're supposed to be. I think the teachers want that. This is their love. They miss seeing their students. I think we have seen and heard conversations and are aware of situations about all the services that our schools provide beyond just the academics. And it's so important that we do everything we can to get back to school 5 days a week as quickly as possible. But we also have important considerations now that are really out of our hands. We have to trust our public health experts. We have to trust the guidance that we receive because my biggest fear is that we make a mistake and we rush too quickly, and we put our teachers or our students or their students' families or the teachers' families at risk. But I also don't want to be too hesitant. We've never been down this path before. I've mentioned before, I think a year from now, we'll look back and we'll say, oh, we should have done it on this date and this date. But we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know, but I absolutely think that we should do everything we can to be back in school where we're supposed to be.
Just a general question to the panel, and we'll go right down the row, left to right. And I'm going to give you maybe 10, 15 seconds, just a quick answer. How do you plan on gathering information from staff and administration on the 5-day? Because your question is very well stated, but that's from a parental perspective. As a school board member, what steps would you take to gather information from staff and administration?
Well, I'm hopeful that we do an interim survey because I think our teachers have been very articulate in contacting us and letting us know what their concerns were and then how things have been going. But I think an all-staff survey where everybody feels open to respond, I think that'll be a very important benchmark.
Okay. Ms. Griffin.
I would actually start out polling my students, especially in the high school, and then I would very simply say to them, hey, you need to get your parents, and maybe we can do a Zoom meeting with them, or we'll put out a questionnaire so that we can get a grip on what kind of response we're going to have.
Mr. Hinton?
Yeah, I agree with the surveys, but I do think there's a danger there of a certain analysis paralysis over it. I mean, you want to find out what everybody wants to do, what the best thing for them to do is, and what makes them most comfortable. But at the same time, there are resources that we have to work with that we're constrained to. So I feel like there just needs to be some very deliberate thought into how it works out.
Yeah, Mr. Griffin, yes?
Can I get a little rebuttal to Mr. Hinton's? One of his comments had to do with truancy. Can I comment on that, or is that?
Yes, sir. I'll give you a few seconds.
Okay, very quickly, the way that we're doing truancy and attendance right now, I feel for those students who come every day and do the right thing along the way. But what's transpiring is that we're being told, at least the teachers are, that if a student is absent from the Zoom meetings all week long, he's marked absent only on Friday. And so at that point, what about the rest of you? I think there's a fairness issue here and one that needs to be monitored, and that goes to your parents, and that goes to your integrity as students.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, please.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question about the truancy, if I may.
Yes.
With the current system we have right now, it's just if you don't do your virtual work for the day, you're marked absent, there's no real repercussions. How would you make it to where students who are on virtual schooling would actually have a reason and a drive to do their virtual work, and maybe some repercussions if there weren't any virtual work done? How would you address that, basically?
You're asking that to which
Yeah, Mr.
candidate?
Sorry.
To me,
Okay.
I think it needs to match what the students that are in school are having to do. So if you're having to be in school and you're not in school and you're being marked absent, that counts against you and impacts your performance, whether it be grades or what your impacts are. I think the virtual students need to have the same thing. So when they're turning in their work, the teacher checks the work at the end of the day. If there's no work turned in, they need to have the same impacts.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Yes.
I think one of the problems we have is that there is a little bit of a different implementation for the teachers on whether the virtual days are synchronous or asynchronous. And if they're truly asynchronous, then you should be able to, if you want to get all your work done on Wednesday and spend your Thursday hybrid day working part-time, I think you should be able to do that. I think that's part of the beauty of the hybrid situation. I think if your teacher has clearly articulated that the virtual days your work is to be done synchronous, then I think those absences are valid. But I think it really depends on how the teacher has defined it and how they're implementing it.
Would you like to reply, Mr. Griffin?
I would. I have been sort of demoted to middle school. That's really not, I'm really glad I'm there. I was a high school teacher at Alternative Education Systems, and we're all now teaching Lula. What I do with my students on the days, and we're all virtual, is that I want to hear their voice, I want to see their face, and if you're not there, then I call. I want to make sure that you're, number one, all right, and number two, that your folks know that you missed a Zoom meeting. And that's kind of how I handle it.
Okay. Samantha, would you like to ask your question, please? Are we changing topic at this point, or are we still on COVID?
One more question.
Yes, please.
Would you be in favor of screening staff and students who attend the schools if you return to a 4 or 5 day week? And if so, how would you go about accomplishing this?
This time, Mr. Hinton, you can have the first response. And I would, Mr. Hinton, if I would ask, could you speak into the mic? Yeah, that would help a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it all comes down to the definition of screening. So if temperature checks, things like that, I'm absolutely in favor for. Getting much deeper in that, if you're trying to do forced vaccinations, I guess you're not really doing those too much, but I know in some districts, they're now requesting parents to give out permission to do COVID test. So if your student comes in, a student's got a fever, they want the right to do the COVID test. I'm not too big on that one. If my child goes in, they've got a temperature, they show other signs, send them home. I'll come pick them up, and I'll take care of the COVID test if I think that's matching up to it. But so that's where I'm at on the screening.
Ms. Green?
I think that if that is what is necessary in order to go back 4 or 5 days, I think screening as in a temperature screen. Right now we're on an honor system, which I think, is probably working pretty well. But my son participates in basketball, and all of our extracurricular activities are screening students as they enter. And I think that that is a reasonable expectation to be able to participate in something that has a little bit looser guidelines. And so I think that if we move to a 4 or 5 day model, I think that that's a reasonable request, just to expect, just the very basic screening to participate and be a part of the school day.
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
I totally agree. I signed the same form that you as a student signed, that I would take my temperature and check to make sure that I did not have any of those symptoms. And I've done that every day since August 31st. So it is a pain, but it has to be done. So coming back into this, I would expect my teachers to be submitting to a temperature check and a simple questionnaire if that was necessary. Most of us that teach are going to be upfront enough to let you know that we're not feeling well. So that's my attitude, is yes, I would be willing to submit to that.
It looks like we've got some topics. We have 2 follow-up questions. Please, sir, go ahead.
All right. Yes, sir. So with dealing with like everything, like Mr. Hinton, you hit on how you feel as a parent, it's, like within your job as the parent to really control like whether your child gets a test or not the school. So my question really for all of you is, how exactly do you deal with the symptom aspect? So I wouldn't really say a victim, but I actually went to a sporting event in which someone tested positive. I had to stay home for 3 weeks, tested negative twice, was out of sports and everything like that. So how do you feel that we're doing as a whole? Like, do you think we're over-exaggerating having to quarantine? Like, say you show a symptom one day and the next day you don't. I mean, how do you think, how efficient do you think that is? And if you would like to change anything about that, how would you do so?
We'll follow the same order, Mr. Hinton, if you want to reply.
So with the symptomatic, if a student comes into the schools, they're symptomatic, I think the school maintains the absolute right to send that student back home. As far as requiring that student to stay home 2 weeks because they came in with a cough or temperature, I don't think I can go with that one unless the student the next day gets well. They probably think they should be allowed to come back in. So either you're symptomatic, or if the parents want to get tests and they show the test negative, absolutely should come back in.
Ms. Green?
So the decision tree on the quarantines and the symptoms and everything is so complex. It's almost like a nuclear codes. If you have symptoms, you can test negative and come back, but if you don't have symptoms, you can't. And it's very complicated, but I do know that that is not defined by us. It's defined by DHEC, and we're following the guidelines that we are given. And that's our responsibility to do that. I do agree that it's a little bit of a mess because I know of some students that are on their second and potentially third quarantines, and it's really burdensome to you as a student. And so I'm hoping that those guidelines get a little clearer, because it is extremely cumbersome now to manage it.
Mr. Griffin?
I really feel sorry for what you had to go through. However, my wife, who is also a teacher, had to go through that same thing, and it was every day. Unfortunately, I think that is the only way we're going to be safe until the students that are going around and attending parties and are bringing this stuff back in are put into a situation where they have to be disciplined at that point. And unfortunately, the discipline that affects them also affects you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this time we're going to move on to our next topic. It's going to be a social aspects section. I would also encourage you, if you hear another candidate say something you would like to rebut, I will remind you to please let me know, and I'll give you 45 seconds to rebut something, or if you want to expound a different perspective. I think we've moved back to the head of the table. I think, Dakota, we're back to you.
We've recently seen a rise of people wanting to become more eco-friendly and basically more just friendly to the earth. How would you make our schools more eco-friendly and just better for the environment as a whole?
We're going to start back to this side. Ms. Green, you'll go first, and we'll move across.
Okay, well, we have the benefit that some of our new schools like River Bluff and Meadow Glen Middle are green certified through, I think it started out as a LEED certification and it's some other certification now. But one of the things that I would really like is a standardized recycling program across our district. That is just a huge absence in our district. And primarily, we lost it because the vendor stopped doing that, which I think is a poor excuse for not having a recycling program. And so I would really like to see that implemented. I know at Lexington Middle School, they have a earth class, a little bit like an outdoor ed sort of thing, where they're studying eco-friendly solutions to problems. And so I think it's always important to, if our goal is to make our schools more environmentally friendly, to also make that a part of our curriculum. And because your generation is much more aware of our ecosystem and climate change than my generation is. That's just to be honest. And so I think y'all are going to lead the way on that. And really, student voices are very loud. And so if you clamor for a recycling program, it'll happen a lot quicker than if a few adults in the room shout about it. So.
Okay, Mr. Griffin.
I think any recycling program is a step in the right direction, but you as students are the leaders in this area. I teach in the oldest school, I think, in the district. It was a high school back in the 1920s, so we don't even have the sprayers for our custodians at this point to come in. I don't know if they come in at night, but they do a good job of cleaning the tables and desks. We have very few students with us right now. So I teach world geography, and so I try to make sure that my students are very much aware of the eco needs of the world, not just Lexington County.
Ms. Hinton?
So I'm a mechanical engineer. That's my life. And what I'm seeing right now is there are two things that are starting to crash into each other. You've got energy efficiency on one side, and you've got ASHRAE guidance on the other side. And what's going on with the ASHRAE dictates the amount of fresh air and everything going into buildings. What ASHRAE is doing is they're looking to see what we can do to, decrease COVID, change all of that, to make that a little bit safer for everybody by increasing the air going to the buildings. When you do that, you have to cool the air, heat the air, condition the air, which costs a lot of energy. So, over the past 15, 20 years, they've been putting a lot of effort into getting that cheaper and more efficient. And these are two very competing thoughts right now. Personally speaking, the way I like to see the earth, with the eco-friendly, I like it from an energy side. I like the photovoltaic solar cells. I like solar hot water heating, things like that that are supplemented. I enjoy the power parts of it. That's just kind of where my specialty lies.
Yes.
I know that, Ms. Green, you mentioned the Earth class at Lexington Middle, I believe. Would you be in favor of maybe making that a class that's available at every single school? Because I know we don't have that over at Gilbert.
Absolutely. And there used to be a Sustainable Solutions Center at Gilbert High School, but it was discontinued a few years ago because there was very low interest in it. But I really think that there might be an opportunity to reinvigorate that program. But I absolutely think that, our middle schools are doing a great job with expanding the opportunities to take some electives that are more interest-based, like outdoor ed, and I think an earth class at all of our middle school and high schools would be an excellent addition to the curriculum.
Okay, Mr. Smith, our next question, please.
Yes, sir, thank you. All right, so we are definitely transitioning, I guess, kind of out of the eco-friendly aspect here, but what is all of y'all's opinion on raising teacher pay, and especially with you, Mr. Griffin, being a teacher, of course, what would you like to see it, say it's raised, say it stays the same, stagnant? Where would each of you like to see it go as far as a raise in teacher pay?
Mr. Griffin, you get to lead the way today.
I'm up first. Do you mind repeating the first part of your question? I think I got the part about the teacher pay, and I know where I'd like to see it go.
That was my question.
Okay.
I was just saying we are kind of transitioning out of the eco-friendly since it kind of is polar opposite.
Gotcha. All right. First of all, I've been fortunate enough to teach in the Atlanta area back when teacher pay started at $6,000 a year. And so I taught in 3 districts over there, and I've been traveling in Kansas, Baltimore, and other places where my wife has had a job. My wife has been teaching for 49 years. The same position that she is in here in Lexington. pays $120,000 in Crystal Lake, Chicago. I'm not asking for that kind of pay down here. I know it's not possible, but the district does need to give raises, and I'm not sure it has done that, a district raise necessarily, or the district paid for it, in several years. That's just an opinion.
Ms. Hinton?
Yes, with teacher pay, I mean, absolutely, it needs to go up. I mean, in my opinion, I'd like to see, at least an annual cost of living, types of raises as a minimum, and, based on teacher performance and so forth, more than that, if it's correct. But yeah, I think as a whole, we could really use the teachers' salaries going up. I think that's been evident by some of the, the marches and so forth we've seen over the past summer and so forth.
Ms. Green?
My initial, absolutely, we should do everything we can to raise teacher pay. I think that at a minimum, teachers, their salaries should start at a commensurate level with the education of other industries. Teachers are highly educated. Most of the teachers in our district have master's degrees or higher, and their salary compared to professionals in the workforce in other professions with a master's and higher, that's where the gap really starts to grow. I know we talk a lot about the southeastern average, and we actually have done local pay increases in the last few years. We did not this year, but we have. One of the things that our district is very committed to is when we raise teacher pay, we raise everybody's pay. The custodians, the housekeepers, the instructional assistants, because it's very important. We want the whole boat to lift, not just one side of it. And so that's very important, as we consider teacher pay. But absolutely, we need to work. I've testified at the State House and talked with our legislators about the importance of raising teacher pay. Right now, the state sets a base teacher pay, and anything above that is local dollars. And so, as Mr. Griffin says, yeah, Chicago area has a lot higher teacher pay, but they also have a much higher tax rate than we do.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mr. Price, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I know this is getting more into the economic aspect than the social, but since you all plan on raising teacher pay, or at least that's what it seemed like to me, where would you get that funding from? Like, how would you get the money to raise the teachers' pay?
At this point, we're going to follow the same order, just concise as you can be. Short answer.
Back to me.
Yes, sir.
So with that one, this might not be real popular, but I look around at the facilities and I see wonderful, beautiful schools. I mean, with inlaid terrazzo floors. I mean, we've got cast in place, ADA accessible bollards. I mean, things are gorgeous. If I had total control of it, I would probably cut back a little bit on some of our construction standards and offset that with the teacher pay. And I'd rather pay for high-quality teachers in a lesser quality building.
Okay, Mr. Griffin?
I think one of the things, I would look at very strongly is I would look at where we could cut personnel in programs such as central services, as in other areas that are not educationally bound to a classroom where we're teaching students on a daily basis. I think that that's one of the things that would come to my mind at that point. And then as a result of that, I don't know where we would go from that beyond that. I think you also have to look at the amount of money sometimes that you are paying athletic individuals who don't teach necessarily on a full-time basis.
I think everybody in the school building is important, but I do think that when we start talking about raising teacher pay, we have to look at priorities. And like Mr. Hinton said, the buildings, we need to look at staffing. I do know our district, the leadership percent of our salaries that are leadership devoted is very small. I think it's like 5.6%. We can raise millage, which is raising taxes to cover teacher salaries. I don't really like the idea of cutting. Really, we have a very lean district. Central Services is very lean, especially compared to some of our neighboring districts. I think a big part of it is working with the General Assembly because so much of our funding for salaries is based on what they provide to us. And what they don't provide, we have to take it out of local coffers, which means we either cut back on programs, we cut back on staff, or we pare down the facilities that we have.
Mr. Griffin, you made a comment in your response that you said you would cut certain programs. Could you expound on that for me, please?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I would probably have to say that there would be programs where they have booked with individuals to do certain jobs within the district. I, quite frankly, don't have access to how Central Services is working. I just know that that's one of the major things that I've heard since I stuck my name in the
In the
race
proverbial
here.
hat, yes.
So it's
So you don't have, and again, I'm not picking on you, I just
Oh,
want to
no,
make
I
sure we're
understand.
clear. There's nothing, you don't have a specific program in mind at this point?
No, I think it would be more of a cut down to see what we would have if we could do it with fewer people and things along those lines. And
Thank-
I don't have access to those figures and numbers, but I certainly would like to look at them.
Thank you. Yes, let's see, yes, you have one more follow-up?
I'll ask one more follow-up. Yes, sir. So kind of like two different follow-ups into one, I guess. So like, for example, like, as teachers, a little knowledge I know, I guess, like a lot of different teachers, like for example, national board certification, that gives you more salary wage, if I'm correct. And as you said too as well, like all the different programs, do you think that there's like too much emphasis on certain teachers getting like less pay, or do you think like we need to focus more on like the programs that we're offering? I guess kind of what I'm saying is like, do you think that we are putting too much money into programs such as athletics, and y'all said earlier the lack of like eco-friendly programs? Do you think we should kind of balance it out or keep it the same? Because you also said too, we want to focus on, Ms. Green, like, you know, all the boat and not, you know, have it lopsided. So if that makes sense. Somewhat.
Is that to me?
Let's start over here with Ms. Green and we'll move
So,
across.
just, I mean, could you like narrow your question down to one question? I mean,
Do you think that we're focusing too much of our attention on programs like in athletics, or do you think we should focus more on allowing the boat to be, you know,
I mean,
flush,
honestly,
like
I
you
don't
said?
think that, I mean, I think athletics are important because every student has different interests and different paths to success and different paths to their future. And so I think that our athletic programs are an important part of our school culture. And so I would hate to see us just say, oh, well, you know, we should cut athletics. I absolutely do not think that we should eliminate or cut national board certification. I think that's an important achievement for our teachers and an important reward for a lot of extra work and for demonstration of expertise. So I think that program is important too. I think what we really need to do is, and this starts at the state level, but education funding just overall, you know, let's fix the systemic problem with education funding. And then I think it will be easier at the local level to balance our needs and fund them all adequately.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Griffin.
I would, I'm not advocating cutting all out athletic programs out. I'm just saying that there is a point at which if you spend more money for one coach or two coaches than you're spending for educational programs, then there's an issue. And you've got to figure out a way to sell that issue to the parents and everything along those lines. I would not take away athletics from any of you who are athletes. I had the opportunity to compete in both high school and college, and it was a great time. But it was a budget. It was on a budget.
Yes. Ms. Hinton.
So that's a broad question, and without knowing the expenses that's involved with each of the programs and, you know, how they're loaded and how they compare to all the others, it's difficult for me to say which one I would cut first. But, you know, with that being said, all things being equal across the programs, you know, me personally, I would probably lean more toward awarding the teachers that are getting the certifications and just, you know, the quality of the educators we're bringing in here. I would probably lean toward, you know, rewarding those first.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are we still in, I can't
Yes.
see. We still one more? Okay. Go right ahead. Ms.
During-
Timmerman?
During the planning period of reopening for the schools, the board asked the input of teachers and parents, yet the students had no voice. Going into the future, how will you make sure the students' voices are heard and respected?
Okay, this time we're going to start, let's see, the last one, we'll start with Ms. Hinton.
Okay. Yeah, with that, I mean, it comes back to surveys. I mean, communication is so important. And that's, when I started running for the board and talking to other people, that was the one thing that I heard the most. Things were not communicated as well. And it just depends on where you're looking for the communication. Perhaps it was there and you didn't look in the right place. So, as far as the voices are concerned, it's put out the surveys, the survey monkeys, the polls, do whatever you need to with the students, and let's find out where the comfort is. I mean, it's very important that we get how they're feeling as well. Same thing with their parents. We need their parents' input also. So I'd very much advocate for that.
Okay, Ms. Green?
I love hearing from students. We have a community participation time at all of our board meetings, and we are delighted when students come and speak. I know y'all are very busy after school and in the evenings, especially Tuesday evenings, but I encourage you, if you ever have anything that you want to make the board aware of, participate come and speak at the meetings, or send us an email, or our phone numbers are everywhere. Call Dr. Little's office. I do know that the Student Advisory Council, that's comprised of students, leader students from all of the high schools in the district, they were very involved this summer in talking with Dr. Little and the leadership about the reopening plans. And they're one of the groups that a lot of the plans are vetted through before they're even brought to the board for consideration. So your
Thank you, Ms.
voices are.
Green. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Griffin.
You ask, I would ask you, and I would like to come to your school to ask you. I would like to visit your school to talk to you, set up a table just like they do the recruiters. Say, hey, I'm here, you have questions. What would you like to know? What would you like to have the board know about you and your school? And I think that's not something that necessarily that we are allowed to do right now on the board, but that's neither here nor there. I think that's the best way to get the student voices. You've got to be able to communicate with us.
Do you have a follow-up, ma'am?
Yes.
Please.
As Mr. Hinton was saying, that he would go through using polls and sending out surveys to the students. The board, none of the students were really allowed that chance for this. It only went through the school advisory for the students that went, or the ones that went to the board meetings. I know many students did not have a clue of the board meetings. Would you how would you go about changing that, or making it so the students can have a voice how can they have a voice if they don't know what's going on?
I think that's a good point. Our board meetings are probably on platforms that y'all don't use. My kids say that everybody's grandma's on Facebook, but the students aren't. But I mean, we can make sure that that's communicated to, through the, Dr. Clamp's weekly newsletters, Gator Bites, to make sure that the students are aware of it, because we do want you to be able to participate. But absolutely, I think that we have learned a lot through this. Hopefully we'll never do this school closure pandemic thing again. But I think we've learned a lot, and I think we would really value a broader input from the students. Because you're right, y'all are kind of like a tennis ball through this whole thing, and didn't really have a whole lot of opportunity to contribute to the conversation and be a part of what the outcome was.
Mr. Griffin?
I'm not sure I understand the question as you put it, but basically, I think I've already said it. I want to talk to you. I don't want any middlemen. I want to talk to you. I want to hear what you have to say, because you're going to vote at some point. I don't know how old you are, and I want to talk to that sophomore, and I want to hear that freshman. Now, am I going to put the same stock in a freshman answer that I am a senior answer? Absolutely not. But I am going to listen, and if I hear it, it's going to be brought up. And I think you're absolutely right. You missed an opportunity.
Yep. Mr. Hinton?
It's kind of echoing what you said. I guess when the decisions are that big, and it's kind of surprising that you don't know about the school board meetings. I get it, so school boards are invisible to me too when I was in school. But, when something is so big, when we're shutting down schools or changing curriculums or just making really major decisions, I think it's important that the board works with individual schools to at least, put up posters, put up flyers, put up anything, put something in the lunchroom. Hey, school board meeting Tuesday at 7, we're going to talk about doing this or that. It's just, the communication just has to be out there, whatever that method is.
Mr. Price, you have a follow-up question?
Mr. Griffin, I heard you mention that you wouldn't, put the same amount of weight on a sophomore's opinion as a senior's opinion. Why do you feel like that? Why do you feel that one student's opinion matters more than another?
It's not one student's opinion matters more than the other. It's his life experiences and his experience as a student in this school. Hopefully, I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Dooley on several students and throughout the last few years. And I put a lot of stock in what a junior or senior is going to say. You're an adult for all intents and purposes. But down here is a ninth grader who has just come out of middle school. He may not have the same life experiences as you. And I think that you have to judge that. You're going to be judged that way in the outside world as well.
Okay, Ms. Green,
I'd like to
I'll give you a
just
few seconds.
clarify a little bit of what Mr. Hinton said. When the schools were closed in March, the board didn't decide that, the governor decided that. And we had no notice. We left on a Wednesday thinking it was a long weekend and never came back. And then the school reopening conversations all happened in the summer when the students weren't in the building. So there was a little bit of a disconnect in our ability to talk to the students. I agree that a survey or some sort of a responsive thing, even if it was at the school level, from the principals to the students in your school, just to kind of keep you in the loop on it, that probably would not have been a terrible idea. But I think that I just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
Just a quick yes or no question for each of you, and it's something that may or may not have discussed, and as a former parent in the district, would you entertain, instead of having a school board meeting at our district office, to my knowledge, every high school campus in our district has a facility of this size or better. Yes or no, would you entertain taking school board meetings on a rotating basis through the high schools?
Yes, I have suggested that.
Okay, Mr. Griffin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah.
Maybe I should be running for school board, I don't know.
Come on, Troy.
All right, let's see. Mr. Lopez has joined us at the question table. Mr. Lopez, are we still on economic issues or are we moving on to a different topic?
We are on economic issues, yes.
Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, so I want to keep the next question short and open-ended. With the onset of the COVID pandemic and our current economic position, what do you believe we should do for the less advantaged members of our community?
This time, Mr. Griffin, you'll start us off, please.
I think that the district set up a tremendous program with the free lunch program and the lunch program where they came by and picked it up. I know at AES we spent days serving the drive-by people that were there. I think that needs to be one of the things that needs to continue on. And I think that it needs to be identified, not broadcast, but identified. And I think that giving those out was just an example of what the district has done. I understand that there are some schools also who have cut fees, several fees throughout the district. So those are the things I think that make a difference.
Mr. Hinton?
Yeah, I'll echo what Mr. Griffith said. I mean, there's been some fee cutting, which I think has been a great idea. I think when it comes down to it, it's important to find out what the needs really are. If it's nutritional needs, then we need to work with the nutritional needs. If it's, people getting back and forth to school, we have to identify what those needs are so we can try to target those needs and try to correcting those needs and fixing them and responding to them the best way that we can.
Okay, Ms. Green?
So I've had the opportunity to help serve lunches this spring and summer through the program that the school bus drivers and the food service workers did. That was just an amazing program, and I'm so glad that the free meals for students, any student, not just those in need, but any student, will continue through the end of the school year. I think that we have an incredibly generous community. Just a little anecdote of my own. In 2015, when the big floods happened and our schools were closed for a week, I had this little idea to make some sandwiches and take them to some of our students that were not getting their school lunches. And I sent out an appeal, and the next morning a group showed up, a very, very large group, and we made about 6,000 lunches that we delivered all around the community. So this community is incredibly generous, and they want to help. And one of the things I've been real pleased and proud of is that a program that started here at Bluff, the Caring for Kids program, that works with our social workers, not only district level, but also in the schools, to identify students that need assistance, their families need assistance, and that fund has really blossomed in the last 4 months as people have found out about it and given money to help those in the community that are in need. So I think that our district is amazing at identifying and then acting to help those in need.
Thank you very much. All right, so you jumped in, so we're going to move back to Mr. Price.
With the pandemic happening right now, in all the high schools in the district, we are seeing a free lunch program going to where students don't have to pay for the lunch because of the whole coronavirus and economic situation. Would you be in favor of continuing that for students who were those less advantageous, who couldn't really pay for a school lunch but could still get the nutritious meal that is provided for other students?
Are you looking for a short yes, no on this one, sir?
Yes, no. If you want to explain, you can, but preferably
Okay.
just a yes.
Well, let's see, I think we started there. I think, Ms. Green, this is yours first.
I think that that would be great because one of the things that I think this program where it's available to everybody is that it takes away any sort of embarrassment or hesitation that a student might have in grabbing a lunch or a breakfast. If anybody can get it, then nobody's going to notice if I get it. And, I would really like our meals to always be like that for our students, so that there's no, that they don't have to worry about, people noticing. I do know, I've mentioned before that Richland 1, their meals are free for everyone, but they're a Title I district. And so I'm excited that the federal government has extended our meal program through the end of the year because I think it is an important addition to our schools.
Ms. Griffin.
Absolutely, I would support that.
Mr. Hinton.
Yeah, I agree. If it can be continued, the resources are there, then I agree with it continuing.
Okay. Now, is there an economic makeup is there a place that needs to be made up economically? I know it's not that we're making tons of money off of school lunches, but is that, and I guess I'm asking you, Ms. Green, because you certainly sit on the board currently, is there money that has to be made up in the budget if we're not having that income?
Our food service is self-sustaining, and so the free meal program is being funded by the federal government.
Okay.
And so, no.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go ahead and move back down to you, Ms. Timmerman.
How do you plan to balance the students' needs in terms of equity and access to quality programs and facilities in Lexington School District 1 in a district that has over 31 schools?
Believe, Mr. Hinton, we start with you this time, please.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. Biggest thing I would have to do is, I'd want to sit down and look at the schools, see what each school has to offer, and just, I don't know what the most current survey of all the schools are. What school has what capabilities? Does Midway, do they have these capabilities versus Meadow Glen? But I think the first thing you do is you get all your schools put into a table, look to see what's out there, what's available, look at your resources you have, look at how the maintenance is being handled, and make sure that you're putting the resources where they're needed most.
Okay, Ms. Green.
I think our district does a really good job of that. One of the things I always teach my own children is that equitable is not necessarily same. And so I think our district does a really good job of helping our schools, regardless of, because the needs are different in our different schools. Programs and grants that will fit the needs of that particular school. As far as academics, like the Law and Global Policy Center, it's housed here at River Bluff, but students from anywhere in the district can apply and participate, and we'll provide transportation for them to come. And that's the same for the centers at the other school. So I think that creates equity for our students. I think the fact that our immersion programs, anybody can apply to be a part of those immersion programs. One of the things that I've been real vocal about as a parent is to make sure that the academic, a little bit like Mr. Price's question about the Earth program at Lexington Middle School. If we're offering it in one place, can we offer it somewhere else or make it available to those students? Because I think it's very, we're pretty good at doing that, but we can always improve. And really, the programs that we offer in our schools are just growing, and we just need to make sure that if a teacher here at River Bluff has a really great idea for a new program, that we replicate it in Peoria and Gilbert.
Okay, Mr. Griffin.
I don't know any facility that's ever going to be equal, but I would like to think that we can adapt and teach whatever courses are offered at one school. If we can't get it at that school, let the students go to where it's offered. I will say one thing that I think, and this is kind of a little bit maybe off the topic, but one of the things I would like to see is I would like to see an equitable distribution of technology and extra technology for each and every school. So if a student has a problem at home, technology goes down, they just exchange it, and there's no loss of time.
Okay. Back to you, Mr. Price. Are we moving on to I want to make a good use of time. We do have a hard out at 7. We now have 11 minutes left. We need to leave time for closing statements. So I don't have your question sheet in front of me, so I'd ask the question panel to please look at your questions, ask the most imperative question first, don't necessarily follow down the list that you have. So at this point, Mr. Price, you're up.
I know you just mentioned the exchanging technology that doesn't work aspect. We saw last year near the end of the year where students who didn't have internet access at home were given certain access to do schoolwork. Would you be in favor of maybe giving students at home who don't have internet access the ability to do virtual school with internet that y'all provide?
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Would you be open to having students be able to do their virtual work with internet that you as a board would help provide for the families that don't have it?
Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Hinton on this one question, please.
Okay. Yeah, so there's been multiple struggles with the technology. I mean, there's internet struggles, there's, all the data right now is going back to the school's VPNs. The VPN servers aren't quite up to where they need to be. So there's been a lot of struggles with that. As far as ensuring that everybody has equal access to the technology and to the internet, I'm okay with it, and I advocate for it. But I would like to see it just, thinking outside the box a little bit. Are there opportunities to work with the Time Warners and the Spectrums and other, some of these other companies out there that may be able to help us with it? Are there partnerships that could happen, just ways to help resource it a little bit better? But, I think it's wonderful ideas. I mean, we were talking about buses at one point in time, making those internet routers and put them out there. They've got cell phone hotspots and so forth. I think there's a lot of potential out there, but I think it's something that would be well handled if we could involve some commercial partnerships with that type of stuff.
Ms. Green?
So I attended a conference in January in D.C., and one of the speakers was an FCC commissioner, and the whole presentation was about internet access around the nation. And the next day, our group met with Senator Lindsey Graham, and I mentioned to him about our Wi-Fi enabled buses here, and he loved that idea. And he that day went and partnered with a senator from Nevada to write legislation to provide Wi-Fi enabled buses for school districts around the country. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden all the fears and conversations we were having about, wow, we really need to increase internet access for our students, all of a sudden it was a reality. So absolutely, I mean, I feel like I'm very hopeful that the struggles that we've seen over the last few months will accelerate the timeline, because back in January and February, they were talking a 10, 15, 20-year rollout of broadband access around the state. Well, 20 years ago, none of us needed broadband. So to plan for something 20 years from now, that's not acceptable. So I'm very excited that we're seeing a real feverish push to get broadband access and internet access to our students, no matter where they live, because I think it's critical for schoolwork, telemedicine, applying for jobs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Griffin.
I think your question was would I advocate the board pay for that? I tell you what I would advocate. I don't know if the board could pay for anything, but basically I think I would advocate that Mr. Salters and some of the senior leadership take a long, hard look at our budget, see if that was available. What they did with the buses and the Wi-Fi was outstanding. I formerly taught at Pelion for a while, and that is, it's very different than what you experience here at River Bluff and Lexington and some of the other areas. So it is important. They did a great job with that. And I think that, I would try to look for that money as much as I possibly could.
Okay, Mr. Lopez, we are now running short on time, so please ask the best question you've got left in your quarry there.
All right, so we have often been blinded by the present threat of the coronavirus pandemic, but aside from that, what do you believe is the largest problem facing our schools?
Mr. Griffin, we'll let you
And
start.
how would you plan to fix it, of course?
You didn't say that last part until just a moment ago. The largest problem I think facing our schools is basically getting the message across to students that they have to work very hard, all students, for their grades, that we have certain standards and consequences apply when those standards are not met. And we have to make sure that you as students understand your role and your time in getting grades. It's very, very difficult sometimes when you see a student working real hard and all of a sudden you got somebody else who just doesn't do the work and yet gets the same grade. And I'll use the example last year in the spring for grades for that.
Okay, Ms. Hinton?
So in a perfect world, assuming coronavirus didn't happen, it's gone, we're back to business as normal, I think that one of the biggest challenges facing this district right now is growth. I mean, there's so many people moving to Lexington. There's so many people moving to South Carolina in general. I mean, it's just, we've got schools busting at the seams, and we've got a construction plan that's been put into place. And, for me personally, if I would look at trying to just better manage the buildings. I mean, let's see the buildings that we have, they're getting older. Can we put more maintenance into keeping those buildings on the books for longer? Are there other opportunities for growing outward? Can we start looking at our site planning to where we can plan into the future? Where we needed 4 acres for a school, let's go ahead and buy all 8 acres so that we're ready for the growth as it continues. I mean, just things like that. But I think growth is probably our biggest thing. And we've got to get the class sizes down, just kind of relieve some of the pressure.
Okay, Ms. Green?
So on today, October 19th, 2020, I think that the biggest problem facing our schools is the mental health of our students. And honestly, the mental health of our teachers and our staff. It has been an incredibly difficult 8 months. And we were concerned about the mental health of our students a year ago, 2 years ago. And the situation since March has only exacerbated that problem. And I think that it's a situation that's not visible. We can't look in this audience and see who is struggling and just feels like they can't hold on, or they either hate going to school or they wish they could be at school all day, every day, because being at home is terrible. And the teachers that are worried about their health and their family's health, but their calling is to be in the classroom. And so they come and they're taking a risk being here. And so all of that, we just have a situation right now that is just, it's terrifying to me as a parent of three teenagers. And so I really think that anything we can continue to do to take into consideration mental health is time and money well spent.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you very much. Mr. Cope, each of them is going to have 45 seconds when I complete. At the beginning, I apologize, we did not do the introductions, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Normally, you thought you had 2 minutes. You've got 45 seconds, and I will hard stop you when he holds the red card up. You have 45 seconds to answer the questions that were sent to you by the center about why you should run, why you're going to be here for school board. So we'll start with you, Ms. Green.
My name is Anne-Marie Green, and I would really appreciate your vote for school board. I have served for the last 4 years. I love this district. My family moved here in 1977. I'm a proud Lexington High School graduate in 1986. And I have 3 children. My son graduated from River Bluff in 2018. My daughter graduated from River Bluff in 2020, and I have a 10th grader here. I love this district. I have a vision for us to continue to move forward together. And I think that it's important for our school board to be passionate and to work together with the superintendent and with the leadership to continue. This district is amazing, and that's not by accident. That's because we have a vision and we have a plan and we stick to it. And I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin, 45 seconds.
Gotcha. I moved here in 1998, was an FBI agent. I retired here in 2006. I have 2 sons. Both are Lexington High School graduates. They're both Marines, one captain, one gunny. My wife still teaches at Lexington High School, and I have taught at Pelion and AES or Focus, as many of you know. I am passionate about my students. I'm passionate that the stakeholders in Lexington County be advised and know what they are getting at all times. And the only thing I'm pledging to you is that I will do my best to see that that happens. That's the reason I'm running. And that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Hinton. 45 seconds.
All right, so my name is Jason. I was born and raised in Greenwood, South Carolina. I've got 3 children, 5, 7, and 9. They're all in Lexington schools over at Meadow Glen. Wife's working as a physical therapist locally here, so we're very much vested in the community. My experience is that I'm a mechanical engineer. I've got a BS and an MS in mechanical engineering. I serve as a resident engineer as well as an administrative contracting officer for the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's just, watching the challenges that the district's going through, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for me to come in there and just help and offer advice and help guide guide us through those challenging waters. So, and that's why I'm running.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this completes our second round of 3 sessions of the Center for Law and Global Policy Lexington County School District Board Candidate Debate. I'd like again to thank our sponsors tonight, the River Bluff Center for Law and Global Policy and Development, and the River Bluff Center for Media Arts. I'd like to thank our 3 candidates for being here tonight, Ms. Anne Marie Green, Mr. Mike Griffin, and Mr. Jason Hinton. I'd also like to thank our question panel, Carla Lopez, Dakota Price, Matthew Smith, and Samantha Timmerman, and for doing an outstanding job on the cards. Thank you, Mr. Hampton Cope, for your efforts tonight and timing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. My name is Troy Fight. I've been your moderator tonight, and good night from River Bluff High School. Thank you. Mr. Griffin, did you and Mr. Hinton, I sent you an email today.